Hello, everyone. Welcome to a very special edition of Family Equality's Out With It, the podcast where conversations are raw, insights are bold, and the mission is clear: to foster a society where justice is non-negotiable and equality is the norm. This is Anna, the creative manager at Family Equality. I wanted to pop in to give you some background for this bonus episode, which features Family Equality Ambassador and former President and CEO James Black, alongside some amazing guests, like Peggy Gillespie, the co-director of the nonprofit Family Diversity Projects. Peggy is joined in this episode by Ted J. Rao, an organizational consultant and the parent of 5 children, as well as Fresh Lev White. Both are advocates who were featured in Peggy's work, Authentic Selves, a book and photo exhibit that celebrates trans and non-binary people and their families. This book was created in collaboration with the organization Family Diversity Project and aims to elevate the voices and experiences of the transgender community, shedding light on both the struggles and triumphs of their journeys. Unfortunately, there are some technical difficulties with this podcast's recording, which is why you're hearing my lovely voice today instead of James's. But tech problems aside, this is a really great conversation about an amazing book and project, and we at Family Equality hope you enjoy it.
So Peggy, as the co-director of the nonprofit Family Diversity Projects, you interviewed all of those featured in this book. Can you share a bit about the book?
Sure. So the book, Authentic Selves, Celebrating Trans and Non-Binary People, which I'll even hold up just so you all can see. And it took so much of my time during COVID because I realized I was hearing so much about the hatred and the violence and the bills that were being targeting trans and non-binary people. And we had an exhibit called Pioneering Voices many years ago. One of my students, interns, had made an exhibit on trans people, but it had gotten so outdated and none of our exhibits were traveling. So I wrote the book proposal. It was accepted by Skinner House Books, great imprint in Boston. And then I began finding and interviewing these extraordinary, remarkable people and their families, their children, their parents, their extended grandparents even, and from all over the country. And then it came out about a year ago and was named the common read for the Unitarian Universalists. So that means every one of those churches all over the country, hopefully, they will be studying and reading with a study guide that's being created for the book right now, and working with their congregations to be more open and affirming.
I love that, Peggy. And I just have to say, I remember when I first met you and you ran up to me and said, you have to read this book. We have to do something together. So that was amazing. So Peggy, you talked a bit about the sort of the catalyst to the book about, you during COVID and all of the anti-LGBTQ plus legislation. But can you talk a bit more about the inspiration? It was the hate, but what else? Because I think we've talked a little bit about your own journey, right?
Yes. So I had, I have a grown daughter, who now identifies as they, them, but for up until pretty recently had been she, her. So I sometimes, Jake says I can just say grown kiddo or daughter. But when Jay was a tiny tot, like about 4 or 5, and Jay's also a person of color, just to add that in. Jay started to be identified by every other person as being a boy because Jay liked to wear a little cap backwards and was extraordinarily athletic to the point where playing soccer goalie, a coach of another girls' team, made everybody on Jay's team show their ID at the end of the game because they said Jay did not play like a girl and was assuming that Jay was a secret boy sneaking into this girls' team, which would be pretty unusual anyway. But Jay was like, please tell them that I'm a girl. So it was really holding to that identity, even despite being misgendered. And, I remember saying to that coach, you're coaching girls and you're thinking a really great player is not capable of being a girl. So that kind of began to open my eyes, because Jay was very young, to the stereotyping and the obviously the gender myths and ideas that people held. And I saw the pain that it could cause several times, with Jay being misgendered, being refused to be on a bathroom line at a camp that was for girls. And so it brought my awareness from, like, being accepting, of course, of all people of all identities, but then suddenly personally seeing how it could be used to hurt somebody, sometimes intentionally, sometimes unintentionally. So that was kind of in my mind all along, which is when later on, when I had the student make this exhibit, Pioneering Voices, that person at Smith was identified as a girl and then later transitioned to non-binary, and now is hovering around the transition to male. So, it's just been in my heart all along on a personal level, trying to challenge, like even the school psychologist said, well, you should make Jay wear girls' clothing if there's a party or a wedding. And I was like, no way am I ever going to force my child to dress in anything that's uncomfortable. And Jay thanks me to this day. And when Jay came out as a lesbian or bisexual at a certain point, Jay said, Mom, I didn't want to come out to you. I was like, really? Why? And Jay said, because I was afraid you'd throw a party. And
quite the opposite of what you typically hear.
So I feel proud of the way I have supported Jay through the transitions, and now working to always get the pronouns correct. I haven't succeeded all the time, but I'm really working on it hard, as we all should. And just then seeing the incredible hatred coming and the suicidal statistics. I mean, I had created this exhibit in 1995 called Love Makes a Family, portraits of LGBT people and their families, and it had a couple trans couples with their children. So I was, that was long before all of, the trans exhibit started. That was much later, but we got sued in federal court to prevent it from going into elementary schools, the exhibit, and became a book. And we won in federal court, so it went into all the elementary schools, and then started traveling and still traveling. Right now, a copy of that exhibit is at a museum in Cleveland, along with Authentic Selves. We combined them so that they would have a lot more trans people, non-binary people.
I love that. And our youth need that now more than ever. I remember you telling me about the experience of, I don't know if they were elementary or junior high students, and how they reacted to the exhibit and how just welcoming and appreciative they were with seeing those representations of our families.
Yes. I mean, I actually grabbed a letter that I got from a K through 2 school. I'll just read this to see if you want to hear this. I asked why a preschool elementary school would choose to show this exhibit, and the principal said, this exhibit has so much love in it, and the subjects are folks who have ultimately triumphed over discrimination and hatred. But their stories almost all begin in fear of being punished for living who they truly are. This torture must end, and our school, the Center School, understands that the way that can happen is for schools to teach cis people and LGBTQIA plus people that all people, all people's identities must be respected, celebrated, and valued. Early childhood through adolescence is the prime time to embed that message. And having observed the exhibit and the book being used in these schools, it's possible. 3-year-olds learn new pronouns. I mean,
it's beautiful. It's so beautiful. So, Ted, what motivated you and your family, your 5 kids, to get involved with Peggy and the Authentic Selves Project?
Well, I too love the project. I think in particularly what I loved about it was, I guess that bathing in love, that just, not just kind of a superficial view, but really showing people in their in their habitat, so to speak, like in their full context, right? I guess what I was particularly drawn to was just the normalization and kind of de-dramatization, maybe if that's a word, de-dramatizing the issue, and just showing people and who they are and what they do. Um, I consider it a privilege that I get to be out because it feels safe enough here. So I wanted to pay it forward, contribute to others, just like I've leaned on others in the process. So I'm actually very proud of another little side piece here, and that is that not only my kids, but also my one of my partners and my ex were willing to be in the book, and that was quite something, especially for my ex, to kind of stick his head out like that. He had no moral obligation to do that, and he did, and I really give a lot of credit to that. So,
Yeah, I love that. I love the phrase you said. He said bathing in love. I love that. I'm going to steal it if you don't mind. If you don't mind, if we can continue, can you tell us a bit about your journey of self discovery? And you said it's a privilege to be out. So your journey of self discovery and your process of coming out as transgender.
yeah, and I actually want to jump on that transition when it's timepiece. So I transitioned in 2018. I guess I was 39 then. Yeah, that sounds right. Am I doing the math right? Something like that. No, actually 37. So, and I considered that late. And actually, honestly, for me, it was the biggest obstacle in the way. Was I remember having this kind of pivotal phone call with a trans friend of mine. And the one question I asked him was, how on earth will I reconcile the years leading up to this? Like, what do I do with that time? Like, how do I forgive myself was really what was the main thing for me. And he said something brilliant. He said, how about instead of beating yourself up for it, how about you're just in awe about the pressure that society has puts on people all day, every day, to kind of stay where they're supposed to be, looking from the outside. And that gave me permission to go like, yeah, instead of, taking it all on for me personally, it was like, yeah, I just did what I was supposed to do for a lot of time. And in a way, it also made a lot of sense because my youngest kid, I guess, was 5 then. So it was and I had kids young, like in my early 20s. So it was kind of the first time in a lot of years that I was really focusing on, wait, who am I and what am I doing? And then with like this huge wave went over me of just me feeling like I basically went through the process relatively fast and really full on because it all kind of hit me at once of like, I had known this all in some way for a long time. And then it was finally time. And once I was able to embrace it, it all was very easy, but the process leading up to it was pretty crappy. Like, for example, one thing that was really a psychosomatic thing was I had headaches for months. It was kind of a habit of get out of bed, go to the bathroom, take ibuprofen, go back to bed, and once it kicks in, I can go start my day. And that is just not the case anymore. It's all gone. That pressure of something is wrong is gone.
I mean, that's just spectacular. So it's you have had no headaches. It's really all about you released something. I guess that's what it feels like to me. Something was released, and that is just, that's powerful.
Yeah, and I had this. I remember telling my partner that it just feels like there's this milk glass, I guess, like in front, like this big piece blocking me from the world, just like I had so few words to describe it. And of course I knew trans people exist, but I always thought, that's other people. Like, it took me forever. I always make this comparison. It's like sometimes people, make this joke about like, oh, I need reading glasses, but I'm not old, oh, I'm this and that, but I'm not old, like how many times can you say these things until you're like, yeah, maybe it is actually that I'm not 20 anymore, right? And it was exactly like that. I'm like, oh, I would like to transition, but I'm not trans. I would like this, but I'm not trans. I've had these thoughts in my life, but I'm not trans. And at some point when you listen to yourself, you have to say like, okay, like how long are you going to keep this up? And that's when that was that moment of big release of like, okay, I'm okay. I guess it's just what's happening. It's really not something I would have like. I was not keen on finding a label at all.
Wow. So, Lev, what about you? What was sort of your transition, process and coming out as transgender?
Yeah, I have this funny story of a straight friend of mine who I had made out with the night before, um, sort of asking me, "Are you trans?" And I'd been out of the scene for a while in San Francisco and living on the coast in Pacifica in a relationship that was sort of not queer enough, I would say at the end. So I missed the whole part about people identifying as trans without doing anything. And so my response was like, of course not, because all of the trans women, most of the trans people I knew were trans women. And even the trans men were like leaving town at the time, transitioning and then coming back with new names and identities. And so there was this idea that there had to be like this labor behind it. And I ended up thinking about it every day for about 10 years. I literally thought, I had to listen to all the rumors about becoming aggressive and a womanizer and all these stories. And am I woman enough? Am I butch enough? Like all this stuff that I had to deal with. And I sat with it and got to this part where, just looking at one of my loving cisgender friends, David, and realizing, oh, I get to choose the kind of man I want to be if I transition. And so one day I turned to my then partner and said, well, if I want to grow up to be an old woman, which was a commercial that was on TV with the old women in the swimming pool with the funky hats on, some song, I want to grow up to be an old woman. I was like, well, if I want to grow up to be an old woman, I want to transition now and see if that's who I want to be. And that was part of that was my journey. And I want to say that in my work with youth and also many folks, older folks, one of the things that I've been sharing with them is the importance of sort of loving wherever you are now and loving the person you were. So I gave this talk at the Trans Life Conference in Sonoma, California. I'm not going to give the whole talk right now, but just basically, instead of, I hate that person was dead, understanding that that person got us to where we are. It's because of that person that you survived and you got to transition. And just watching people change and begin to experience a sort of self-compassion for the experiences that they were suffering because they couldn't trans or didn't know and all those things. I just wanted to add that, like loving all of ourselves all the time, even into the transition, which is a difficult time because once we transition, I remember, even though a lot of people in my community already thought I had transitioned, I hadn't. But I remember going to Safeway where they used to say your name. And every time I got missed, miss this, miss that, miss white, I would always it hurt me because I had started taking testosterone. And it was interesting how there was this expectation that everybody should know. And just loving myself through that period and understanding that it's just going to take time. So, yeah, it's been a beautiful journey. I remember looking in the mirror once when my beard was coming in, which took 4 years. I was also the last person to get underarm hair. And so I remember looking in the mirror and seeing my beard and going, there you are. And just that it was just so intensely beautiful. Yeah, thank you. Thanks for letting me say.
I wish that we talked about the notion of loving who we were, because a lot of us, and I'm not planning to medically transition, but there's a social transition, right? There's different types of transitions, and I know when I hear the name Stacy, my birth name, there was some like, well, that why, that was not who you were supposed to be, and you weren't living your truth. And rather than having this notion of that person got me to where I am today, allow me Jane. So I appreciate that perspective, and I wish that that we talked about that more in the community, about that, what you said, loving all versions of yourself. Like I love that. So I want to talk about how important representation is, and I remember when Peggy approached me to do a blurb for the book, and after I read the book, and I remember saying something to Peggy about just the representation that the book provided for someone like me, and that how, because it took me till my 40s to really know who I was, and I had to leave corporate America and move to the queer movement, personal choice. And what I didn't know is that once being around my community in this really impactful way, that I was going to be in another self-discovery journey that I thought I was done with. It's like, oh, I'm lesbian and I'm done. No, that was not the case. But I didn't have representation. I didn't have the, if you want to call role models, I didn't have any of that. And I know when I think about being a young queer youth in South Texas, and I think about folks like you, Ted, and folks like you, Peggy, and you, Fresh, how wonderful it would have been to know that folks like this exist. It would have taken a lot of heartache from my little teenage heart. So how important do you think that representation is in media and as this book is in literature?
To me, it's like the media, and it's happening more and more. I mean, I've been watching this TV show. It's called Loot, and MJ Rodriguez stars in it along with Maya Rudolph, and they don't make any. I mean, MJ is just the woman boss in this case, and is a trans woman who's gotten a lot of fame because of Pose. And seeing things like that kind of representation, and then for us, for this book and the exhibit, like it's actually at U as a Texan, it went into the El Paso Museum of History, the book and the exhibit. I know because of what I hear that people, they need to see. I mean, to be visible, to have representation. Like the little kids that I was speaking with recently at a school, they were little, fourth, fifth, sixth graders. They loved having the exhibit, the pictures all around their library, and they all had the books they have on display and looking at them in their classrooms. And this one little kid, like, she's like, oh, or something. And actually not she, they said, I'm bisexual. They were probably like 10 or 11. And my mom's trans, and I'm using they, them pronouns, and just wanted to talk so much. And I feel so accepted here. And to have all these pictures around me makes me feel at home. And I mean, it brings tears to my eyes too, because it is so crucial. Just like in the old days when we did Love Makes a Family, kids in the schools did not see any images of families like theirs. And, like both, I mean, Ted in particular, he has these 5 kids that are in that school system, and they accepted you, Ted, when you came out, and they all spoke with such love. And again, their willingness to be part of in the media and be showing themselves visibly tells me how much they value not having anybody else be alone. And that's where the media can help tremendously, by portraying people, just like in this book, just people living in their family lives. The only difference is what they've had to suffer through from transphobia or homophobia, for that matter. One guy in the early book, Love Makes a Family, said the only difference between our family and anybody else, straight families, is we just get up in the morning and try to find the socks and get everybody to scrub their teeth. But the only difference is that we face homophobia. And so I want people to have these images in everywhere.
Yeah, I agree. Let's talk about, the book's called Authentic Selves. And so what does it mean to be authentic to you? And I'd like to start with you, Ted.
The first thing that comes to mind is, um, okay, I'll answer with a question. So here's another metaphor that I used quite a bit in explaining to people what happened before and after, or kind of, transition. So there were the headaches, but the other one was this sense of like static noise, like when you have remember radios? When you had radios and you had this sound on. When you get into the car and you realize a few minutes in that it was on the whole time and that it was actually annoying the whole time, but you didn't realize, right? And then you turn it off, and that sense of relief of like, okay, that is what it felt to me. That's what it felt like to me to transition and go like, oh, now I'm just living my life. That's fantastic. And that's, I guess, what authentic means to me. It just means not bent out of shape. It means not in any way, I don't know, having to fit something that I'm not fitting. I'm just doing what I want to do.
Yeah, what comes up for me is liberation, freedom. I feel like I'm living the person who I was born in the world as, if that makes sense. Like the transition is part of my life experience, so it feels natural. Like and because I have a good forgiveness practice, like I get to mess up and begin again and try on this thing and begin again, and so it's loving. It feels honoring this life to be able to be who you are and live out and proud about it, even as it can be dangerous at times, right? Because I chose to transition to a bigger target in our system. I once had a white trans man say to me, "Wow, this privilege that we get is amazing, isn't it?" And I said, "If you mean that I'm more likely to get pulled over, no, I'm not having that much fun with that part of it." So I'm very conscious about both the gifts and the gift to actually put other genders before me at most of the time, and then also and have that be a choice, but also the risk and what it feels like, when I'm walking near a police officer or any act of misidentification. So there's both, and I wouldn't do it any other way. Like, this is me.
Even with all of the what could be seen as obviously challenges, but we also know there's always danger is a real thing, especially in this day and age. You wouldn't change a thing. That's authenticity.
That's what I'm talking about. Walking around like a black man is a real thing. And so I'm like, it's a conscious choice. It's not like I'm not playing around, for the people who think like we're just testing or whatever the hell they think we're doing, excuse my New York. But I'm just like, this is real. This is me. And if you can't see the love in me, then you probably have some investigating to do in yourself, because that's what I'm living. That's part of my commitment in my life and what's authentic. So I'm committed to being the love that I think that we're all born as in this world.
I love that. And if only the people who oppose us would do the self evaluation that they need to do rather than attacking us, wouldn't we be in a better place?
And that is the crux, the reason for me that I did this project. And it's just that outrageousness. I can't understand. I mean, I've been doing this work with all kinds of prejudice and myths and stereotypes for all these years. And I still come to the place of, why does anybody care who anybody else is, as long as they're loving and kind? I mean, that's the crux of being human. And there's so much delusion. It's just delusion to hate anybody. I haven't figured that one out.
It is. And I think it's, we don't have to get, go down the rabbit hole because I can, but I there's a lot of self-hate that's projected onto our community. And that's unfortunate. So my closing question for everyone is that the movement for equality hinges not only on fierce honesty, but also fierce hope. So what's one thing that you're fearlessly hoping for in the future? We'll start with you, Ted.
Well, for many people, seeing this book and coming to the conclusion that trans people are not weird, that you can live a normal life. And in particular, I think one thing that I'm really hoping for is many people who were thinking about transitioning and maybe were held back because they thought that they'd be, that their parents would shun them or that they would mess up their kids, and that they would see that normal life is on the other side, or at least can be for it's probably more likely than they think it is. My parents told me I would mess up my kids, and sometimes I pick up the book also just to remind myself that that is not the case. So, hope for just normal life.
Yeah, I want to really allow people to think about, we're such a small part of the population, and gas prices, everything's going up, pollution's going up, the environment. And a part of what you're being conditioned to do, we're a distraction. We're a distraction from your family not being able to buy food, from your, people losing jobs, from the education system, and to just pull back and understand that we are individuals having our own experience, and what we're doing and how we're living, if anything, is impacting the world in a positive way, because we're bringing a greater understanding of what it is to be human and not live in a binary. And the last thing I want to say is, it's not just hope about the future, but this article I read this morning is the Minnesota Senate outlaws gay and trans panic defense in a milestone LGBTQ rights legislation. For trans people and LGBT people, look for the positive news. Stay on the positive train, because that's happening. So may this continue to happen now. Organizations like this one who are providing this opportunity, how can you support them? How can you help spread the word? Let's begin now. So thank you for allowing me to share.
Thank you. Thank you so much for that. Thank you. So I know Peggy is having technical issues, but I'm going to thank her too. Peggy, Lev, Ted, thank you so much for joining me today. I learned so much, and I really appreciate you being yourself and what you're bringing to the world and community, and as you just said, humanity. So thank you. I appreciate it so much.
The book version of Authentic Selves was released by Skinner House in May of 2023. It's a companion to the museum-quality traveling exhibit that includes photographs and interviews with people of all ages who are trans, non-binary, and gender fluid. Authentic Selves can be used in schools, colleges, houses of worship, libraries, museums, conferences, and workplaces. To learn how you can bring this exhibit to your community and or to order the book, visit FamilyDiversityProjects.org. This has been a Family Equality production. As the leading national organization for current and future LGBTQ+ families, we work to advance equality through advocacy, support, storytelling, and education to ensure that everyone has the freedom to find, form, and sustain their families. Today's episode was recorded by Family Equality Ambassador, former President and CEO, James Black. Our producers are the communications team at Family Equality, and our amazing music is designed by Michael Koppelman. Special thanks to Clockwork for supporting this podcast, and special thanks to you for listening. The fun doesn't have to stop here. Follow Family Equality on socials at Family Equality for up-to-date resources, community events, insights from the movement, and ways to get involved. Remember, this is more than a podcast. It's a platform for change. So rate, subscribe, and review this podcast to help us spread the word. As always, you can support Family Equality and the amazing work we're doing on behalf of LGBTQ+ families by donating at donate.familyequality.org. You can also reach out to chat more about potential sponsorship opportunities. But for now, we'll catch you next time.